everyone. This is Tanner here, and welcome to the NFL podcast. Today I'm going to be going over my AFC before the season predictions. So on the left side of the screen is the predictions I made before the season started, and on the right side is what actually happened. And I want to go here through all the AFC divisions and really go through and how did I do, right? Keep track of kind of what went wrong, what went right, and I think also kind of use this as a way to review these teams' regular seasons as well. So kind of a two-in-one video. And we begin with the AFC North on screen here already. And I want to start with a team that I'm really happy with how I predicted them, and that's the Bengals. This was a team that I predicted to go 7-10, and they go 6-11. I said they go 3-3 in the division, and that's what happened. And my ultimate thing was with the Bengals was that I just was very low on this defense, and I had a lot of questions about the coaching staff, and kind of both of those points came true and intertwined with each other to give us this Bengals season. I do want to note that if Joe Burrow was healthy for the Bengals, maybe this team gets a couple more wins. Maybe they're an 8-9 win team. Hard to say, but that is part of it. And of course, when I made these predictions, Joe Burrow was healthy, so I do want to mention that. But I think a lot of the issues we saw with the coaching and the defense came true. I was very skeptical of the Bengals defensive coordinator Al Golden, who came from the college ranks with Notre Dame. Notre Dame's defense had been really good, but I thought him going from a defensive coordinator in college to the NFL was a big step for him. I felt like if he maybe took a positional job in the NFL, then kind of worked his way up, kind of like Mike McDonald did, now we see how great he is with the Seahawks, Super Bowl champs, I thought that would have worked out better with Al Golden. It just kind of took a while for this defense to get going. I will say for the final 4 or 5 weeks of the season, the Bengals defense was better. I would say it wasn't amazing, but it was better because it was really not good at the beginning of the season. This team really struggled with pass rush. I questioned the Shamar Stewart draft pick. He struggled to really get going. Trey Hendrickson was great, but he can kind of only do so much. This team just really struggled schematically with coverage. A lot of teams were able to really have success. I always go back to that Vikings game where you had Carson Wentz, and the Vikings just really able to attack this Bengals defense using play action, a lot of simple offensive concepts, which is not a great showing for the Bengals defense at all. I will give credit, DJ Turner, cornerback, very nice season for Cincinnati. I'll give him my shout outs. But yeah, as a whole, this team just really struggled. And I'm just lower on Zach Taylor as a head coach. I think this Bengals team lacks aggressiveness. They're very much a team that struggles at times. Like, if they're down in a game, they're out almost. Like, you have, I think, like I said, that aforementioned Vikings game, there's a lot of times this Bengals team just really struggled to get ahead. And I do think that is a bit of an issue. They did have some good competitive shootouts, right? I look at that Bears game this year and that Steelers game where they beat the Steelers. Joe Flacco versus Aaron Rodgers, that was really fun. There was so many times this year where it just felt like the team was just trying to find their footing with the rhythm and just kind of where they're at here. And I think that's just kind of been an issue in the Zach Taylor era. And I think that's just something you need to find out. And that's why I'm just low on him as a head coach, because it's just trying to find that identity where I think sometimes the Bengals play it too safe. And then, there's times where they should be more aggressive, right? Because you have a really good offense, right? You have great receivers. You have Jamar Chase. You have T. Higgins, right? You have these fantastic playmakers. So I just feel like the Bengals are kind of this team that's kind of just stuck where they're at here. I don't think they're a bad team, but the defense has regressed because they made the Super Bowl in 2021, but that was a really good defense under Lou Anarumo. They've regressed. They still have a really good offense, right? Joe Burrow looked great this season when he came back healthy. Joe Flacco did some good things when he was a starter, right? There are some moments with that, but there's still a lot of just question marks I have about, can this team reach this true ceiling? And I think for me, I just don't see them as the elite AFC contender anymore. I think they're a tier 3 team. They're going to be competitive. They can beat you, but they have a lot of flaws. And I think we saw that this season. I'm also going to put the Browns here, their Ohio brethren, I guess, as correct because, I had Cleveland as kind of a competitive but not great team winning 6 games. They won 5 games. And this quarterback thing kind of panned out exactly how I thought. Now, I think a lot of people had that take, so I'm not going to say I invented it, but you had Joe Flacco starting, right? He gets traded away. Then Darren Gabriel starts a couple of games. He looked fine. Shador comes in, kind of that 1, 2, 3 pecking order. And that's, I thought, the best that could have been done here after a very just kind of weird offseason with the quarterbacks. And then this defense was really nice. So that was good. You had a great defense, but then this team just struggles to have the offensive firepower for a lot of reasons. I think the receiving core was really bad. That's one thing that really surprised me was Jerry Jeudy regressed so much. Jerry Jeudy I thought would be a kind of a good asset. He was not this season. So this team really struggled at the receiving core. The running game was very nice. Quishon Judkins, the rookie, had a good rookie season. Okay, but when you struggled to pass the ball, it was really tough. And I think all three of the quarterbacks I mentioned had some deficiencies. Joe Flacco, just kind of is at an age where his arm, where it's not where it used to be. Darren Gabriel really struggled with kind of some accuracy issues, which surprised me. Reading the field, that was something that I thought could have been better. And then Shador had some good playmaking moments extending the play, but then there are some things where he really struggles with pocket presence and taking sacks. So there's so many times, especially in the Shador era, where you would have a 20-yard pass to like Isaiah Bond, and it's like, okay, we're going somewhere, but then Shador takes a sack and kind of kills the drive. So that just happened a lot. So really just inefficient offense here. The defense had, its moments. You had Myles Garrett win Defensive Player of the Year. Great for him and whatnot. I like Denzel Ward. I like a lot of these other guys here on the team. Carson Schwarzenegger, the rookie, whatnot. Mason Graham, the rookie defensive tackle, I think had a pretty solid season. I do want to give him a shout out because it feels like no one's really talking about him. So there's stuff I like about, the Browns, but it was just putting it together. And that's what happened. They were that type of team, and now they have Todd Monken coming in. Just very interested to see where kind of things get going with Cleveland. Where does this team go, right? Where's this thing going with them, and how do things go next season? So that's Cleveland for me. Happy about those two. Then we have the Steelers and the Ravens. We'll talk about Pittsburgh here next. So this one's hard if I should give myself a point or not, because I like the Aaron Rodgers signing. That panned out very well. I thought the defense would be better for the Steelers. They were not that great of a defense until the second half. I like the DK Metcalf trade. I still think DK Metcalf had a nice season. I'm of the opinion of that. I think for me, with the Steelers, it's hard because this team won the division at 10-7. They were 9-8. I had the Ravens win the division. I did not have it being a close division, so I'm going to say no points for the Steelers or Ravens. But yeah, Pittsburgh ultimately kind of a season that did and did not go according to plan. The first half, you had a pretty defense, but Aaron Rodgers and the offense were clicking. In the second half, the offense was still solid, but the defense improved. And it felt like another kind of Steelers year where you had, some good stuff here, with, the defenders we know the names of, right? The offense was solid. We've seen these Steelers years before. And I will say this, I thought this year for the Steelers was a bit more entertaining, right? I thought Aaron Rodgers being on the team just added a lot of cool storyline value. Him playing the NFC North this year was really cool. That was the NFC division that this division played. So seeing him play the Packers was really awesome. The Vikings, the Lions, that was really cool. Him battling Lamar Jackson twice was fantastic to see. The Joe Flacco duel, as I mentioned, there are some good moments with Aaron Rodgers on this team. I think Rodgers overall played solid. I thought he distributed the ball well. I thought he overall played good quarterbacking. I just think the Steelers team is just kind of in the middle of where they're at, where the NFL's at. They have a good defense, but it's not elite. This is not like a Seahawks, Broncos, Texans, Rams, Eagles level defense. But it's not a bad unit. And then offensively, they're solid, but it's not like we're talking about the Rams, Niners, even the Lions, a team like that. So it's just kind of a middle of the pack unit, and that's where they've been. They move on from Mike Tomlin. They bring in Mike McCarthy. We'll see what happens here with Mike McCarthy. Does Aaron Rodgers come back? That'll be interesting to see. I also like Will Howard, who's a rookie this season that we just finished. We got hurt, so we didn't really see him. But Will Howard could be an interesting quarterback. But I don't know. I look at the Steelers as a status quo year that still had some fun moments, and I think you'll take that as a Pittsburgh fan. Then you have the Ravens here, who, man, this was one I really missed on, to be honest. So why did that happen? I think for me, it's a couple of things. I think, first of all, it was players and coaches regressing. My main point of why I thought the Ravens were going to be so good was that I thought that this offense was going to be great. Lamar was going to be awesome. He was fantastic in 2024. Derrick Henry was going to be great. This receiving core was going to be really good. And the defense that looked really good at the end of the last season was going to carry over. That didn't really happen on either points. Defense first, they just took a while to get going. It was really about mid-season until this defense started to play really elite, and then, but it took a while. You look at the early games this year, we had the Bills, the Lions, the Chiefs. We giving up so many points and yards. It was like, oh my goodness. I think, too, just Cal Van Noy, who's a great edge rusher in years past, he's up there in age, and you saw regression with him. Malachi Starks, who you drafted, took a while to get going in the NFL. Roquan Smith regressed a bit too. Kyle Hamilton was really good, but he was a one-man show. I also want to say Wiggins at corner was really nice. So you had some good players, but it just didn't fully click. And then offensively, kind of the same deal. Derrick Henry regressed. I still think he's a really good player, but he looked a bit older, which is weird to say of Derrick Henry. He had some excellent moments. You look at the Packers game, it's like Derrick Henry is still that guy. He's still that Hall of Famer. But there's a lot of games, too, where Derrick Henry just did not look like himself. Lamar Jackson, too, his mobility looked lost. He looked pretty good this year, but he wasn't as elite as he was. Zay Flowers I really liked, but he had some weird moments. And this team as a whole just had some really bizarre, I call them like brain fart moments, where it's like missing a play, fumbling, penalties. This was just a team that had so many weird, sloppy moments in their season where it's like, okay. I look at that Vikings game where they won. It was cool to see Lamar ball out in Minnesota, right? Very fun stadium. But this team had some really weird moments and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, they won, but it's like, at what cost? And then we saw that ultimately pay out in the Steelers game, where the division came down to week 18 and the Ravens lose. And yes, a missed field goal, you could say, is why, but a lot of other mental mistakes, missed coverages and whatnot. So this was just a Ravens team that very much was kind of like, if you pull up the Ravens highlight reel this year, you're going to have a really fun time. You're going to enjoy yourself, right? You're going to say, hey, what a fun team. But there's so much down inconsistencies with the Ravens that just makes it tough to really call it a great season. I mean, they only won 8 games. They were 8-9, and just, it's disappointing that they were not in the playoffs. And I don't know. So, at the end of the day here, only giving myself 2 points for the AFC North. A very interesting division this year. For a lot of shakeup, the Ravens move on from John Harbaugh. I'm excited for Jesse Minter, kind of get this team going. I think in 2 years, they're going to be, I think they're going to be a really good team. I think next year they could make a surprise Super Bowl run, but I really think in 2 to 3 years, I think this team at least appears in the Super Bowl then. So, AFC North, very fun this year. I will say each of these teams did have entertaining moments to watch. I do have games and memories and recollections of this being a very fun division, but it was a wild one. And speaking of wild here, let's go to the wild AFC West here. So, yeah. Not great stuff here, looking at this. So let's go, we'll start with what I got right, and then we'll go into the wrongs. So the Chargers, very happy about that. And this was even with Rashawn Slater was injured at this moment. Now, Joel got hurt during the season, but I just feel like the Chargers kind of slipped on as a team. I know they have their playoff deficiencies. I know there's stuff they could do better. Like, I understand there's moments where the Chargers could be better, but I just think they're a very solid NFL team. Jim Harbaugh's a really good head coach. I still think he's kind of underrated. I just think this team plays tough defense. They're a very physical unit. They play good offense. Are they explosive all the time? No. But they just kind of go out there and kind of just do the right thing. They're one of those teams where they're not a team that really has a ton of bad moments. They will have sometimes some bad games and some off moments, but you look at this division, the Raiders, or say last division, like the Bengals or Browns, there's moments of that team you can say this could be better. Or this is a bad thing, right? You can say the Bengals defense was bad, the Browns offense was bad, the Raiders O-line was terrible. The Chargers did have a bad O-line, but that's due to injury, right? Not so much to roster construction. I just think this is a well-constructed team that just is very solid. They know what they're doing. Now, I do think a point with this is the Chargers could be more explosive. They could be a team that has a bit more of those X factors going on, if you will. A team that's sometimes a bit more harder to beat. It feels like the Chargers beat you in the coaching film room, but I think it would be better if they had guys that can take over games. And I think that they're building towards that. But I think ultimately this season, they had some games where you wish you saw more of those guys take over. This team reminds me so much of the Packers. I've said this before in this podcast, but it's kind of true. I think they're very similar. Where you talk about the Chargers, like they had some great wins. You go ahead, you beat the Eagles on primetime, you beat the Cowboys in Dallas. Very good wins. And you had, in the Cowboys win, He had a really good offense. Justin Herbert looked great. He was going down the field. He was awesome. And in the Eagles game, that was a more defensive win. We had Derwin James making some big plays and whatnot. And all these guys stepping up and just really good defense. But then you had a game like the Giants game. We go ahead and lose to the Giants in New York. And Giants, I like some of their pieces, but it's like you kind of want those guys that can really take over games here. And I think that those guys that like can just be like boom, like a Puka Nakua, Myles Garrett, a really great running back like Jonathan Taylor, Bijan Robinson, a quarterback that can really get there. And I think the Chargers are close to that. Justin Herbert, I think, had moments this year. I look at the Chiefs win in Brazil. I look at just a lot of great moments this year where he was really able to elevate that X factor throwing on the run. But then you have some games where he just kind of looks off. I think sometimes with Herbert, he's too much of a rhythmic passer. We would like to see him extend the play. Kind of, if he has a bad game, then it's a bad game. Where I think that the quarterbacks above him, Mahomes, Lamar, Allen, Burrow, Stafford, are able to adjust more. Where I look at Herbert having issues with that. Where it's like, I look at the Chargers or the Jaguars game this year, where it's like that was a bad Herbert game kind of throughout. Right? Or the Patriots playoff game where that was a bad Herbert game throughout. There's a ton of great Herbert games, as I mentioned, right? But some just bad ones. They're not there, right? But they're there. And you would like to see him kind of audible in game. And then the running game, you have Amorian Hampton, who was good, but then he was hurt. Kamani Vidal was great. The receiving room here, Lam McConkey, okay. He kind of had a sophomore slump. Quentin Johnson looked really good, right, for the first couple weeks, but then he got quiet. I think, too, Greg Roman as offensive coordinator, the run-heavy attack team just caught on. So the Chargers, I'll say this. I'm very excited for this team next year. You bring in Mike McDaniel as offensive coordinator. Excellent hire. I love that so much. I think that'll be a perfect fit. Now you lose Jesse Minter as defensive coordinator, but I trust Jim Harbaugh to refill this defense. And I am kind of picking the Chargers to be a Super Bowl team next year. And next year, I will say this, because I know a lot of people are very much negative on the Chargers. I think next year is a make or break year for Harbaugh and Herbert in a sense. I don't think they're going to move on from either if they lose, but I think next year is a really big season that you got to kind of piece things together. Say, okay, sure, we like where this team's at here. They're a very just well-polished unit, but can we get those signature wins? And we'll see. But spend a lot of time on that because I think the Chargers are a fascinating team. Also because he's the only win here. The Raiders here, I had them going 8-9. They go 3-14. At the end of the day, I just kind of thought this team was going to work. I thought that the offensive weapons of Brock Bowers, Ashton Genty, I like that kind of pairing of, okay, you run the ball, you can throw it here, you can kind of have that dual threat in the offense. I thought Geno Smith was going to be a good quarterback kind of distributor on this team, but it just really came down to a bad offensive line. I still think Geno Smith can play solid football, but he was getting pressured so many times. Genty had trouble running, so there went the offense, right? Bad line, bad offense. And then the defense really surprised me. I really like the Pete Carroll hire. That did not come to fruition at all with this defense. Just the pass rush, it was Max Crosby, and that was about it. The secondary really struggled. This was just not a great unit, and this team just let up points. I think just back to so many games where, the Raiders just were letting up points, and I just think Pete Carroll, dude's a Hall of Famer, but I think just the NFL caught up to him, and I think we saw that happen. So, wrong about the Raiders. I was really flip-flopping on this team. I had them initially in the playoffs, then I said 5 wins, then I said on 8 wins, so I wish I was a bit lower, but, the Raiders here, we'll see how they do. They bring in Clint Kubiak. They're probably going to draft Fernando Mendoza. Excited for them next year, right? I think this could be a good turnaround team. So I don't want to spend too much time on this team because I do think this is a bright future. Then you have the Chiefs, who I predicted to go 11-5. They go 6-11. Hopefully Mahomes is okay. And I know a lot of people say the Chiefs failed because of the Mahomes injury. This team was eliminated for the playoffs. Kind of went by the time Mahomes, even if he was healthy, I don't think they're a playoff team. But yeah, my thing was Chiefs might have the doubt, right? And that just didn't happen. I feel like this team just offensively really struggled this year. And I feel like teams were kind of keying in on a lot of the stuff the Chiefs do. The deep ball really was an issue with Mahomes. The running game really wasn't there. It felt like in years past, the Chiefs were able to kind of finesse their way to first downs, yards, making the extra truck move, missing the guy, missing space. And just felt like this year, team said, no, we're not doing that. We're going to make sure we tackle you, block, cover. And there's so many times where I thought the Chiefs were going to get it, and they just didn't. So that was part of it. And then defensively, I think this was a solid unit. They had good games, but just it's kind of like the Chargers, where it's like you want that X factor. And I also do want to mention Tuli Tapuatu for the Chargers, really great player, and he could be an X factor. I also think Derwin James is, but I was kind of meaning more of on an offense for LA and more of that here, and also maybe an edge rusher here. I think Tuli could get there for the Chargers. I think he's close, but can he take that next step next year? I do want to add that in here for LA. But yeah, Chiefs just kind of pretty good defense. We would like to see them get elevated here. I think overall of Kansas City, this was just a year where the teams just kind of caught up to them. And when you go and have the success that Chiefs do, that eventually happens with the Patriots. I said this before. There was a 10-year gap between winning Super Bowls with 2004 and 2014. That happens in sports and in life. People just pick up on trends, and that happened with the Chiefs. So that was that. And then the Broncos here, I was, again, wrong on this one. So my main thing with Denver was I like Bo Nix, but my thing was, okay, also look at how the divisions actually played out. Broncos and Chargers were 5-1 in the division. Chiefs and Raiders were 1-5 in how things panned out. That's very interesting. But anyways, my thing with the Broncos was I like Bo Nix, but the defense was really good in 2024. I thought it was just going to regress. And we have seen this before in NFL history where teams will have one really good defensive year, and then they'll just be good after that. But then they'll regress. I look at, the Bears in 2018. Really awesome defensive year. Next year, Jaguars in 2017 next year. And it's just like the Broncos. I'm like, hey, they had a really great defensive year in 2024. 2025, teams are going to catch on to them. No, Patrick Surtain was awesome. Nick Bonito, what a season he had, an edge rusher. Just a really great team overall. And, they were such a great team. Number one in the AFC. Just what a year for the Broncos here. Just a great team. And the fact that this team could get better, Sean Payton at helm is very, very exciting if you're a Broncos fan. But yeah, I was wrong about them. Wrong about the Broncos and Seahawks, both number one seeds here. And again, it was defense. Defense just really improved for these teams. And I'm interested to see next year how defensive regression goes or what teams are able to keep that. Because that could be a new trend in the NFL. We've seen these defensive hot streaks. But let's go ahead. I think we'll go ahead and start with the AFC South, where... Oh, man. Okay, so too good, too bad. Let's start with the good here. Okay, I like the Jaguars and Texans, so we'll put those down as wins. I think for me, with those teams here, I'm very proud that I picked the Jaguars here to be first in this division. My thing with Jacksonville is I said, hey, I really like the Liam Cohen hiring as head coach. I think that this team's just going to be a very solid unit. I think Cohen's going to do some good stuff with Trevor Lawrence. I think Brian Thomas is really, really going to have an amazing season. You get Travis Hunter. I just liked how forward-thinking this team was. And that kind of happened. Yes and no. Brian Thomas struggled. Travis Hunter did as well. He got hurt. Hopefully he's okay. But it was just really just raining in his defense. This was a really good defense. This was a tough physical unit. Great pass rush, great coverage. It was just a team that was really hard for teams to just kind of beat. It felt like, so many games this year, whether it be the Chiefs or the Niners or teams like that, it was just really tough. Now, they weren't perfect every game, but Anthony Campanelli did a really good job as defensive coordinator. And then Trevor Lawrence had that hot streak. Second half of the year, played very, very good, played like an MVP caliber candidate. And I was just very impressed, right, with the Jaguars overall. And this was a team that really just was able to have that correct balance of kind of the new innovative offense with that classic tough defense, right? I talked about the Bengals, how they had a great offense, but their defense was not that good. The Jaguars were kind of that correct balance you need, and they're just such a fun team to watch, and just, it felt like a team effort. I know that sounds kind of, generic to say, but it just felt like kind of everyone was stepping up. Remind me a lot of the Seahawks, if you will. So yeah, Jaguars ultimately, just what a season for them. Really happy with how this team's looking at, and the fact that it could be better gets you really excited. And then the Texans as well. Yeah, I'll say that's a win. I had them making the playoffs here. Now they won more games than I actually thought they did. I thought they only won 11 games. They won 12. What a year for the defense. I mean, Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter were amazing, especially Will Anderson. I think he's entered those top-tier conversations. The offense had its good moments, right? I'm still kind of a C.J. Stroud guy. But, yeah, man, the Texans, I just like them. The D'Amico Ryans, this team just, every year they've been there, they've lost in the divisional round. This has been a consistent playoff team. I think Houston kind of deserves more respect. I understand you would like to see them go further. I do, but I still think this team has a lot to really offer. And I think that they've done an excellent job. It wasn't that long ago where the Texans were not a good team. We're talking about them as one of these bad teams, right? One of these really just oof teams, but they've done a good job really improving things, really getting things going. The offensive line was an issue coming in, and they ended up being okay. Like this team won 12 games. I think that's really cool, and they could have maybe won more. And that's a good sign. Like this team, just under D'Amico Ryans, is I think it's just a healthy culture. They're resilient. They're battle tested here. I like Houston a lot here, and I'm glad that prediction was good. That I had them second in this division and making the playoffs because I remember like I think people had Houston, but it was like okay, and I also people too. I think they had them winning this division, but I ended up having them second here behind Jacksonville. And I think the other thing too is that I'm glad I kept my head high on Houston, where even when this team was 0-4 this year or something like that, I said I still like this team. I still like this defense. I still like D'Amico Ryans. I still like the Texans. I think this team has so much to offer, and it really does. And Derek Stingley is great, and look at just him and his pass rush. I mean, it's really special stuff here, and I just really think that this team is going to really soar in the next couple years and really hit that Super Bowl, window. Now, the main question is, what's the deal with C.J. Stroud? But I like Nico Collins. Like I just like a lot of this team, and I think with Houston, you work on improving the O-line and really just running straight here to that Super Bowl. And then the year after here, if you say C.J. Stroud has another playoff stinker, then you can maybe say, okay, we move off from him here. Then we have the Colts here, who I predicted to go 1-15. They went 8-9. So my thing with the Colts was I just didn't like the quarterback thing they had, where they had Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson. I was very low on that. Also thought this defense was not going to be good. And half of that came true. I think this was not a good defense. They struggled with a pass rush here really all year. When you struggle with pass rush, quarterbacks have more time to survey. They're able to produce more. Like, this was just not a good defense here. And then offensively, they were good. And I'll say I was wrong there. And I was just impressed with Shane Steichen. I think he coached his team up very well. Jonathan Taylor was excellent this year. Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce, what a year for him. Wide receiver. He had a great year. And just, this Colts team was able to get wins. I just think I was really low on bringing in Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson. How does he go? And just, I don't know. And this team had a tough schedule too. They had a very tough schedule, but they were able to get some wins. And yeah, I was wrong on the Colts. Probably one of the more embarrassing predictions in this video. But, life moves on, and that's ultimately here what happens. But yeah, I think for me, with the Colts, the other thing is that I view that their top end talents were not good enough to win these close games. When I should have invested more into that, I really should have gone more into the offensive line, Jonathan Taylor, give Shane Steichen more credit here when I just didn't. And I was just say, hey, how's this team going to beat this team? Well, they did, and I should have done that more. Also, cool, Phil Rivers coming in. That was a neat thing that happened. I enjoyed watching him play football. And then you have the Titans here, who, I don't know, man. This was an interesting one here because I said 7-10. They go 3-14. This team was in a lot of games, right? They seem better than a 3-win team. Cam Ward had some good moments this year, right? He showed flashes. Tremari DK was a great rookie receiver. You fired coach midway through. Ultimately, like, all that considered, this team was competitive. They were close against the Seahawks, right? They were close against some of these other teams. Like, I think this was the best year scenario for Tennessee. You bring a new coaching staff, Robert Saleh. You go ahead. You say you're competitive against good teams, but you still lose enough to get a high draft pick. I like that. I think that's a good thing for Tennessee. And I think that you just help Cam Ward. I think Cam Ward could be really special in the NFL. And I don't know, Tennessee, like, I'm not angry at how this season went for them. Now I'm not a Titans fan. I know some Titans fans were really upset with some of these losses, and I understand that, but I don't know. I leave myself saying that was a year where you feel good about more stuff than you would expect. Now, just because they could have gone 7 wins and they didn't, I'm not going to give myself a point, but I don't know. I think over AFC South, for kind of the wild stuff you had in this division, I feel pretty good about that. And then we have the AFC East here coming up, last but not least, and I really think here, I might give myself all 4 points here. Now, the big one is New England. I had this team making the playoffs. I did. I was very happy about that. A lot of people did not, but I had them. Now, they ended up winning the division, but they made it, and I'm going to give myself a point for the Bills. In terms of the Patriots, I just really liked the way this team built up, I thought this defense was going to be really good under Mike Vrabel. They were. Drake May, I thought was going to be really nice. He was great. And this team was just awesome. I mean, when 14-3, go to the Super Bowl, and like the Patriots, man, were just a team that felt like they just had a good mix of kind of those X factors with a toughness here. Drake May was just able to really go out there and just really have a star season. Stephon Diggs reminded the clock here. You had a great running game once it got going. You had a defense here filled with guys like Christian Gonzalez, who was really good, Milton Williams. But you had so many other guys just doing their jobs, playing very well, which you get in a Mike Vrabel type of team. And I think I was just seeing so much throughout this season of guys stepping up, having their number called. And I know people say it was a schedule for New England and an easy schedule. My thing was the Patriots 2 years ago, the past 2 years before this one, they were one of those bad teams. So the fact that you win 14 games, 14 is impressive. It's not like, I'm sorry, that schedule thing kind of irks me because, like, I'm not even a Patriots fan. I like the Eagles and the Ravens, not even New England. But it's like, if you win 10-9 games, I maybe understand. But you win 14. 14. And, like, I understand they had some easier opponents, but still, the fact that you beat them is impressive. And just the way they did it, too, where Drake May was beautiful with the deep ball and whatnot, just, I don't know, New England I just really like. I'm interested to see where they go going forward because they have some things to clean up, like the offensive line and whatnot. I could see this team either being, and I said this before, like the Eagles in 2022 where they lost the Super Bowl, but then 2 years later they made it back and won. I could see New England doing that. I think Drake May has the talent. I think Mike Vrabel's a really good head coach. You have Josh McDaniels. But there's some stuff that could be a blunder. So we'll see for New England, but just what a year for them. And then the Bills as well. 12-5, they go 12-5. I thought they had some messier games than I expected, like the Falcons game, the Texans game, the Dolphins game in Miami. So it's just some weird blunder games. But there were games, too, where they looked really good on the offense. I thought Josh Allen had a very nice year, all things considered. James Cook was excellent this season. Let's go, James Cook. He was a powerful runner. Like, let's go, James Cook. Defense could have been better, but Bills, yeah, just kind of another year. Now, you could say I had them win the AFC East. They did not, but I had them making the playoffs. 12-5, that's how things went here. Very excited for them next season with Joe Brady. I really like the idea of them getting a guy who's an up-and-coming offensive-minded coach. I just think that's so important for this organization with a Josh Allen to go with that kind of direction. But yeah, good stuff from the Bills overall here. It felt like kind of, like out of kind of the big-name quarterbacks in the AFC with Burrow, Allen, Mahomes, and Lamar, I was 2 out of 4. I got the Bengals and the Bills right, and I got the Chiefs and Ravens wrong, which feels kind of accurate, right? Because it was a wild season for those guys here. And only one of them made the playoffs, which is just so interesting to think about. But you know, also had guys like Drake May emerge and Trevor Lawrence and whatnot. It was just such a unique season in the NFL. It truly, really was. But yeah, Bills here. We'll see how they do next year, but I like them. They also hired Jim Leonard, excellent hire as defensive coordinator, bringing that Broncos defense. Then you have yourselves the Dolphins here, who I'm trying to see if I give myself a point or not. I had them 9-8. I thought it was just going to be, like, I was lower on them. I don't know why I had them at 9 wins, because I remember being lower on them. I was just like, they have kind of a tough schedule. Or I no, it was a schedule. I said, hey, this team has its holes like the defense, but the schedule, I also had more faith in this offense. I'm going to say no points here. I think that's just too much of a big gap. Miami, too, had a very tough start to this season. Like, there was talks about this team being, like, terrible. Now, they ended up being fine, but, you know, the Dolphins are rebuilding. They released Tyreek Hill, Bradley Chubb. They hired Jeff Hafley as their head coach. Are going in this defensive rebuild. I think that's such a good direction. You know, you had some fun moments this year. You had Devon A-Chain looking really nice. You had, you know, those highlights. And Mike McDaniel here got some things going, but I like the new defensive approach. I think after going offense and trying to win now and make these big trades, drafting, developing is the right way to go for the Dolphins. Then the Jets, I don't think I'm going to give myself a point. I was close with the record, but I really liked the Aaron Glenn hire. I was very excited for this defense. That did not happen at all. The offense was just not great. So no points here, but ultimately the AFC, and we'll see what happens with the Jets. Just a lot of questions there. But I ended up getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7 right. And I think you could argue the Dolphins and the Jets here, say 8 out of 8 or 9, but yeah, that's pretty solid here ultimately. And ultimately for these predictions, I think I did pretty well. I got a bit, I think I did 7-7, so about 14. Like, that's pretty good, a bit less than half. In a very wild NFL season, it was fun to do this. But thank you everyone here so much here for this here. This is going to be kind of the final NFL season recap video. I'm going to go into tier rankings, draft content, and it was a fun season. I can't wait for more.